Hello, everyone. These are some videos on Rudyard Kipling's poem, The White Man's Burden. If that sounds racist, I think it is racist. I think it's undeniably racist. And here's where we, come into problems. Why should we read something that is racist? Um, that's a question that I cannot answer. Um, Kipling himself, very difficult. He embodied many common attitudes about race, about colonialism, about the different cultures. He was not a simple man. He was not a simple thinker. He was not a simple writer. He's a writer of fiction. Rudyard Kipling won the Nobel Prize, I think, in about 1908, and has been a controversial figure for forever. And this poem, which is a pro-colonialist poem, which is really encouraging. This is Englishman Kipling, who spent some time living in America. I think his wife was American. Who is encouraging? This is during the, I believe, during the Spanish-American War, and this is during a period where the U.S. is basically colonizing the Philippines. And it's an Englishman, their huge empire. This Englishman kind of encouraging his North American Anglo-Saxon white cousins to also become colonialists. Kipling. This poem was not applauded universally at its time. We have this idea that things that are overtly racist or overtly colonialist in former times were applauded universally. It's not true. Some people love this poem, and a lot of people hated it, including, for instance, Mark Twain, who wrote an interesting parody or response to it. Um, so, but it did embody a lot of the thinking on a lot of people. Certainly, the kind of thinking that stood behind the British Empire of the time. And the reason I'm giving it to you, I don't know, I'm giving it to you because it's interesting. But I'm mostly giving it to you because we'll be reading W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of White Folk on Wednesday this week. And I thought to have some notion of the kind of attitudes that Du Bois is criticizing, really condemning in that essay, that this would be a good example to set that up. I mean, just as we, kind of need Milton's attitude towards women, at least, to get a sense of what Mary Wollstonecraft was arguing against in the Vindication of the Rights of Woman. You need some sense of what exactly was it, or what generally, not exactly, but generally speaking, what was it that Du Bois was arguing against? And I think this is a pretty good example. And make your own judgment about the poem. It's an infamous poem, but it's not written without skill, that's for sure. Now, whether a work of art can have something like this political attitude at its heart and still be a work of art, that's something for everyone to decide, as far as I'm concerned. Let's take a closer look at it. I mean, parts of it are going to be offensive. But parts of it are not. I don't know. It's called The White Man's Burden, and that white man's burden is what it sounds like. That is, it's the burden of the European coming to usually an Eastern country and civilizing it, right? Which is the attitude. Again, looking forward to Du Bois. That idea of civilizing is ironic, but take up the white man's burden. Send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need. That's interesting, right? Kipling is saying that colonialism is not for the colonized, is not for the colonizer, right? It's for the colonized. That's the claim here. That is that at least the British Empire, taking India or parts of Africa, places in Asia, that this is for the benefit of the people that they've conquered. This is the idea, right? To serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child, which is definitely racist, right? I mean, this notion that the people that have been conquered by the European are half devil and half child. That is, half child in the sense of, not yet enlightened, not yet civilized, and half devil in the sense that there's part of them which is quite maybe even evil. Right? Take up the white man's burden in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride, by open speech and simple and 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Well, again, Kipling sees the process of colonization as being good for the conquered, right? To seek another's profit and work another's gain. That is, that the European or American colonizer is doing something to better the place that they've conquered in his mind. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. That's a very famous phrase that came out of this, the savage wars of peace. I suppose he meant the subduing militarily of places around the world, but to establish a peace, right? To fill the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. Again, Kipling sees the colonizer as being benign, as being helpful to feeding people in these places when there's famine, to healing their sicknesses. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, watch sloth and heathen folly bring all your hope to naught. Again, saying that the people that have been conquered don't have the ability really to even, I mean, it's almost as if he's saying, well, we've given you all these things and now you've destroyed them, right? To watch sloth and heathen folly. The heathens are the people that the non-Christians basically that they've conquered, and his frustration with them. I mean, this is a rough poem. Take up the white man's burden, no iron rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. Kipling himself grew up in India. He had a lot of sympathy for the sort of average British functionary in India that sort of quietly did the work of building up the country. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. He saw this as a heroic enterprise. Colonizing was civilizing for him and building infrastructure. And he loved engineers, sort of people who, in a very humble way, build things, right? He saw the work of the colonizer as being really basically the work of God, as a civilizing mission. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard, right? This idea that the Europeans, actually the British, are on this colonizing mission to better the places they've conquered, and they don't get any gratitude. Maybe Kipling should have realized maybe why they don't get any gratitude. People don't like being conquered, but that's Kipling, the blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. And almost as if, why don't you appreciate us conquering you? The cry of hosts ye humor, slowly toward the light. You see what he's saying? The cry of hosts ye humor, slowly toward the light. That is the idea that the European, the white race, was somehow bringing the other races, so-called races, to the light, to enlightenment. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian night? Reference to the book of Exodus in the Bible, the liberation of the Israelites, the Hebrews, from bondage in Egypt. Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye will or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen peoples shall weigh your God and you. Right? The idea that you're bringing, for him, it's Christian civilization that the British were bringing, and that he's encouraging the Americans to bring to the Philippines. Although they've already got Christianity there, because they've been conquered by the Spaniards. But, this notion that you've got this great responsibility, you've got to live up to it. For him, for Kipling, Western civilization was this great gift that the British had brought to these parts of the world, and they had a responsibility to live up to their principles, right? Take up the white man's burden. Have done with childish days the lightly proffered laurel, the easy, ungrudged praise. Comes now to search your manhood. And you definitely see manhood was a big deal for Kipling. Through all the thankless years, cold, edged with dear-bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Really, I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm not a literary critic. I don't know if it's a good poem or a bad poem. It could be bad. I don't know. But it's extremely interesting, and it is Kipling's ideas. Kipling written all over it. Couldn't have been written by anybody but Kipling. But at the same time, it does seem to embody a kind of ideology and an ideological defense of colonialism, of basically what he considers white Anglo-Saxon. That's why he liked America, because he saw it as a fellow Anglo-Saxon culture, not just a European culture. Really a defense of the idea that the world is going to become a better place because the Western white culture is conquering the world, right? For all these reasons. Now, the interesting thing, I think, is to let this all sink in and then read Du Bois's The Souls of White Folk, where he mercilessly, Du Bois, just tears all of this down. This is an extremely interesting poem. I don't know if it's good or bad. It's definitely offensive. But sometimes it's good to read offensive things if they help you understand the world, I think.